is that in this moment, we have to stay centered in this value of compassion, because we don't want the pendulum to swing from one side to the other. And we don't want, there's this white guilt that's talked about a lot.
Right.
And we don't need any of that. I mean, there are things that we should recognize and own as you have, that you have been privileged, and you shouldn't feel guilty about that. It's the way things were. We can't go back and change what happened 50 years ago or 5 minutes ago, but we can change how we perceive and act in this present moment. So,
hello, world. It's me, Dennis, and we are in search of the new compassionate male, our podcast. I'm the producer, and I'm here with the founder, Clay Boykin. Hi, Clay. Would you introduce our guest today, please?
I will. How you doing, Dennis? Will Rucker, welcome. I've got your bio here, and I'm going to partially read it because you have so many irons in the fire. The first thing I see on this is where there's a will, there's a way. And as I read down through this, I get that. It's fantastic. You are the founder. Let's see. It says here that you're the founder and lead pastor of the Intersection Spiritual Community. And of course, we mentioned Compassionate Las Vegas. You've got the podcast there, and I want to know more about that. And American Lung Association, the Western Division Health Promotions Director, and board member of the Interfaith Council of Southern Nevada. Community
Nevada.
Nevada. Okay.
Nevada.
Community partners. Thanks, Dennis.
Well, you're quite welcome. It's just that I've been learning that lately, so we're really working because you guys are really important.
Yeah, Community Partners for Better Health, the Nevada Minority Health and Equity Coalition, and you've got a very interesting educational background. Interlochen Arts Academy, your undergraduate degree there. In Biblical Studies and Pastoral Ministry, master's degree in Executive Leadership. Wow. You're on your third book. You love hiking. Your husband and partner, y'all have been around together for 17 wonderful years.
Congratulations.
And you've got 3 dogs, and you underscore tiny dogs.
I mean, little bitty. Well, one of the things that Clay and I have talked about deeply in our own evolution in this, and we'd love to know from you, can you talk about the evolution in your life? I'm 72, Clay is in his mid-60s, and where you came, the evolution of your concept of a power greater than you are. From when you were a child, what you were taught, how you were able to break through into this what I assume is this greater than we can conceive principle.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I am so honored to be a part of this podcast. I've seen a few of your episodes. You've had some really tremendous people on, so I'm really, really honored to be a part. My journey is exactly that. It's a journey. I think the thing that makes it so unique is I was essentially raised by my great-grandmother. She lived to be 98 years old.
Oh my.
And so I had her in my life for a very, very long time. But as a child, she would come to my home and stay with me while my parents were at work. And in the summers, I would spend it with her, of course, because both of my parents worked. And so I kind of entered the world in a senior citizen's home. So
wow. What was her name, Will?
Her name was Willie Lee Parrish, and she went by Billy.
She went by Billy, and she was born, a little of her history?
She was born in West Virginia and grew up there, spent some time in Detroit. She was actually adopted at the age of 4. So she had an adopted family. Her birth mom, I guess, readopted her at about the age of 12 and took her to Detroit. Then about 18, 20-ish, she got married, had 2 daughters, who out of them, she got 6 grandkids, and now she's up to 18 great-grands.
Oh, wow.
So, quite a family has come from her. But she was a deeply spiritual woman. And I used to tease her because around the home she had crystals and different charms, and she would talk to things. And I'm like, Grandma, you're so strange. Now I find myself doing it, you know. So
I know.
but
There's so many ways to access the universe, right? And to access this principle that many people call God, other people call love, so other people call higher power, Allah, and then many different ways of accessing this. But in your way, could you talk about your journey?
Yeah, so my journey again begins with her. She actually gave me my very first Bible, and so I still have it to this day. It was probably bigger than me at the time. One of the family Bibles, you know.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Yep.
She would read it with me all the time, and so between her and then my father's mother, who would take me to vacation Bible school every summer, that was really my introduction to Christianity. On Sundays, my mom would take me to church, but our church wasn't like the traditional evangelical church. It was really rooted in some African spirituality and those type of practices, though it was a Christian church. So I was always kind of in multiple worlds at once. When I became a teenager, a high schooler invited me to morning prayer around the flagpole, and that was from a church named Word of Faith. I fell in love with that church because they taught the Bible based on the original languages, and line by line. It wasn't just the emotional aspect that you get with some of the other denominations. It was really teaching, and I've always been drawn to learning and just understanding. So it really resonated with me. They were very, very conservative, evangelical as you can be. And at this time, I'd already come out as gay. So, of course, I could go back in the closet to fit in, which is a whole nother talk show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But it did give me a solid understanding of how to study and the importance of really learning and knowing like history and geography and things of that nature. So to fast forward a little bit, I actually went off to a boarding high school, as you mentioned, Interlochen Arts Academy. While I was there, I started a gospel choir. And what was amazing is there were literally more people from the continent of Asia than there were African Americans on campus. So that gives you an idea of how detached from my tradition everyone else was. And so to do a gospel choir, there was really an honor. And to see the power of this music moving in the lives of my fellow high schoolers was really amazing. So we sang at churches all around town, and it was fantastic. But what I later discovered was it wasn't necessarily just, you know, a gospel message, but it was really the message of love and of hope and compassion for each other that was resonating. And we did that through music and artistic expression. So fast forward again, I graduated from high school. I'm in in college, actually as a music education major. I'm the worship leader at the African and Methodist Episcopal Church. And that's when I really discovered my call to preach. I wanted to perform and sing and act, but it was there I started preaching. Yeah. So not anything that was ever in the plan by any stretch of the imagination, but it felt right. And it felt like home for me in that time. So I ended up going, you know, for biblical studies and theology, because you had to do that as part of that denomination.
Yes.
And so that's where I cut my teeth in preaching ministry. And then I traveled across the world preaching it started a church in Ghana. I mean, you know, all kind of different things. And then I gave it all up because it no longer fit me. I found myself and lost all idea of my religion. And what did that to me was Las Vegas. When I opened the church here, one of my very first members was a transgender woman. Another one of my founding members was a pagan. And all the things I had heard and been taught about these people just didn't hold to be true. They were loving and they embodied the characteristics of the Spirit that I saw in the scripture. And they many times did it better than the Christians in church on Sunday. So
better than me.
I had to reevaluate how I did things. So we transitioned and left the denomination of Word of Faith and became a spiritual center where we really became an interfaith organization.
Oh. God, this is compassion. What Clay is doing, Clay, you're doing on this is, you were talking about compassion is love in action.
Yeah. That was one of my challenges. Has always been this idea of love. Well, all it takes is love. All there is love. Well, how do I grasp hold of that? You know, I need something a little more tangible and someone shared, I forget who it was, they said, well, it's love in action is what compassion is. Well, I can got something I can anchor to. And that just made a big change for me in my life once I started to realize, okay, I can't just pray. I can't just say, okay, God, I can't do all these, try and find love. But if my intention is good and I'm in action, then I feel like, yeah, I'm in compassion.
Yeah. And we have been, Will, we have been, I have been over the course of my life, the beneficiary of the white male patriarchy. That has now really what we've come to realize and we've become to study that really came to a big head. That I would like Clay to tell that story again, how it came to head for him. But as we've been going through this journey of how it has become toxic for all of us. It's toxic for humanity. The system of the patriarchy, taking away the people, just the system of how that works. And me being a white male, an elder white male who has benefited my entire life from this and my experience, and then what happened?
Well, we've been gathering for 8 years on Monday evenings, and we'll have anywhere from, now it's 18 to 30 guys every Monday night, different mix depending on who's available. And it was May 25th. We were having our typical Monday evening gathering. And the topic of conversation that night was aspiration. What are your aspirations? And we were, and it was, we have everyone is welcome. That night, it happened to be 25 white guys. And we're talking about our aspirations, and we're connecting with one another. Nobody's judging anybody. It's a great evening. I woke up the next morning to see on the news that right at the time that we were having our Monday evening gathering, George Floyd was murdered. And I kind of went into a bit of a shock. And as I watched the news, I thought to myself, I wonder what his aspirations were. And, and we were it was a defining moment for our men's circle, because we are contemplative. We try not to go, well, the world needs to fix this. No. This is going into me and centering myself. And so we don't bring in a lot of outside issues to try and resolve. And I said, but I can't not say something about this. And so we've made a change, keep that together, but we're doing a separate study on racism in America that we're digging into. But it was, a couple of weeks after that, George Floyd's second grade school teacher surfaced. And she had one of his projects that, she kept all the kids' projects. She pulled out his, and it said, George Floyd's aspirations in life. He wanted to become a Supreme Court justice. Yeah. So that May 25th has marked a change and an understanding about, or a consciousness of being a privileged white male, and really let's begin to understand what that really means.
Do you feel, Will, that there has been a significant shift in the conversation on race and on reconciliation of what this country was founded upon, that we can begin the process of healing here?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And again, I'm so honored to be a part of this work in Las Vegas, hosting conversations about this exact subject and involving everyone that has an interest. So from our political leaders to our grassroots organizers, we've had these conversations. And what I am seeing is there is a real intentional openness on the part of folks like yourself to learn and to hear and to recognize the things that had been hidden. When you're involved in a system for so long, it really just, it doesn't, nothing stands out. It's kind of like how when you're in the pool, the water you just feel that temperature. It's no longer hot or cold. It's just where you are. And then you get out there and go, oh my gosh, I'm chilly. So now people are starting to step out of the water and recognize like, oh my gosh, this is real. And what I'm seeing happen is really an awakening to consciousness in general and the importance of things like compassion. Because without compassion, it doesn't matter if we recognize racism, we have to be moved to do something about it. And the root issue, really though, if we think about it, racism is not our root issue. Our root issue is simply not acting in a compassionate way, not having that as our central value. So understanding, of course we love freedom, we're Americans, and so we value freedom, and we should. Freedom's important. And without the capacity to engage in that freedom, then freedom is but an illusion. And so without that compassionate piece that makes sure the playing field is not only equal, but equitable, then we really don't have any progress happening. So I'm happy to see the windows opening and eyes opening and things changing. But the thing that I want to really emphasize is that in this moment, we have to stay centered in this value of compassion, because we don't want the pendulum to swing from one side to the other. And we don't want, there's this white guilt that's talked about a lot. And we don't need any of that. I mean, there are things that we should recognize and own as that you have been privileged. And you shouldn't feel guilty about that. It's the way things were. We can't go back and change what happened 50 years ago or 5 minutes ago, but we can change how we perceive and act in this present moment. So if we're centered in this value where we love one another, where we seek the highest good for the collective, not just us as individuals, then we'll see the eradication of racism and bigotry and sexism and all of the other isms and phobias that are out there. So that's kind of my stand on it right now.
It's so, I so appreciate what you're saying. This is a different conversation than it was before. Absolutely. And it was about shame and guilt and who's got more. If you're going to get more, it means less for me. Those kind of conversations. And I'm not seeing that. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of knee-jerk reactions when someone say, well, Clay, you're a privileged white male. You're a white supremacist. And I thought, whoa, don't call me that. But we start looking after it, and I get my emotions out of the way, and I start looking at really what's happening here. Don't pick up shame and guilt, Clay. Just learn. John Fleming, my prayer chaplain.
This was great.
He said, Clay, we've been studying you for 400 years. Because I said, John, what do I do? What do I do? Tell me what I need to do. And he said, Clay, do your homework. We've been studying you for 400 years. Now it's your time to learn. Do your homework. And that was John's a wonderful guy, and I'm so grateful that he was the one who slapped me in the face with that.
So do study, find out what it's like, what it means, so that we can understand this, this compassion. There's a with aspect of it, that there isn't me and you, me or you, but it's me and you.
Yes. Yeah, and when you're talking about studying, that's something that I'm finding really fascinating right now. A lot of people are concerned about our history and the threads that bind us together as a union and as a nation, of course, history being one of them. But what is happening is as voices that have previously been silenced are able to speak now, a different aspect of history is coming to light. And so when you have the talk of founding fathers, I just watched Hamilton, the musical. I'm so glad that's available now. He was way less nice in real life. We know that, but musical. But seeing our founding fathers portrayed by people of color, number one, was amazing, and it really made me feel a part of that story. Yes. But the other thing that I think is important to recognize is through that art, I then began to contemplate the real history and the terms that we use when we discuss these subjects. So, for example, the term the slaves. Well, they weren't slaves. They were enslaved people. And so we have to be mindful of how we refer to these things. When we talk about the owners of these people, well, they did torture people. They were rapists. That's what they were. And to try to soften that language to honor them actually is a disservice, because we need to recognize that in the most horrendous, awful, dark places, great things do and can emerge. So let's not whitewash our history. Let's not make
Yes.
it something it isn't, but let's be honest about it. And let's have these voices that haven't been heard before be able to speak up and tell their side of the story. Their side of the story isn't we conquered America and now look at how great we are. Their side of the story is we were raped, we were beaten, we were abused, we were fed scraps, and we survived. So let's talk about that too. And as you said, it's that with, both and, not either or.
It's stunning to watch my consciousness grow over the course of this time, because that's what if we are going to be men and women who have, Clay, would you talk a little bit, because I'd love to get your take on this, Will, about this being an archetype to arise. Could you talk a little about that, Clay?
Well, as I've been doing my work with men over the past few years, about a year ago, I began to realize that there's a new archetype that's evolving, and it's the new compassionate male archetype. That's this awareness. But at first I was saying, well, it's the new compassionate man. And something didn't feel right. And I came back and said, no, I'm not talking about gender. I'm talking about the male energy. So that's what I am. I'm in search of the new compassionate male, which is inclusive of everyone. And it's that male energy.
And we were having, when we were talking about how, because I grew up in the liberal Christian metaphysical side, in the Christian Science, in this, there was always the concept of Father, Mother, God, as opposed to Father God. So there was that sense of, and this is what I feel like is that we're getting some kind of a balance in this, to be able to have an archetype that can emerge, that can be a healthy aspect without denying all the parts that had to come before. I think that's one of the really important aspects, is that we not deny what came before that, but we accept and own that, and then emerge into this next one. So anyway, that's rather messy, and I certainly didn't explain it clearly, but can you take a piece of it, Will, and carry it forward? So it's like a baton. It's like I'm coming around the turn, and I hand it off to him, and he
No, Dennis, it's like a hot potato.
This one definitely is hot.
It's yours, Will.
My mother has always been someone that is deeply intuitive, and she would pray Father, Mother, God. And this is, 20 years ago in traditional Christian churches. She still calls herself a traditional Christian. I keep telling her, Mom, you are so much more than that. You're so expanded. But I was so judgy of her. Because I'm like, God is Father, But you're absolutely right about the masculine energy, the male energy. It's vital, and when within each of us lies that feminine and masculine energy. Right. One will tend to dominate, but they're both always present in all of us. What has happened, in my opinion, is we have not valued the feminine energy. And so because we have done that, that's why you have the patriarchy, and that's why you have homophobia and other things. Yes. But that feminine energy is so vital, not as an opposite, but as a support or a complement to the masculine energy. Yeah. And so when they get together, that's when you have wholeness, and that's when the world works for everyone. I love the Christian Science phrase there. And so with this masculine energy is now not necessarily changing, because you still need all of that, and it's so vital, particularly in this moment. Yes. But what is happening is it's no longer insecure masculine energy. It's whole masculine energy. And so it can rely on those feminine traits and to utilize those to be heightened in its own way, versus trying to deny those, which then, of course, you get toxic masculinity. So that's now right. You have the completeness, the yin and the yang kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. How many times, Dennis, are we hearing this?
I know.
Slightly different language, but it's we're getting there.
This is why when we began this, the podcast and working on this, is that we wanted to be in search of. We have not gotten to a destination and are asking everybody else to come out there. We wanted it. We knew it was going to be sloppy. We knew it was going to be messy. There were going to be switchbacks because we're in search of. I'm looking for it inside myself. I'm looking for how, Will, can you help me learn about myself? Clay, you do that every single time I'm in a conversation with you. The depth of where you're working so much on yourself, both of you, give me the opportunity to be able to do it for me.
Yeah, and here's the thing that I love about this journey concept. Once we've transcended an area, it doesn't mean that we transcend and release. It's transcend and include. So as we go through these cycles, we have to keep in mind what we've learned in the past and utilize it in our current journey and our future and all of that. So the world turns for a reason. It goes in a cycle. Like that's how we see this.
Boy, that's so true.
That's one where we can really learn from the women and really learn from the earth and our own, that there are cycles and seasons, and I'm in my elderhood, so I get a chance to appreciate and discover and learn, just as you are at your age and Clay at yours, that we can at the places where we're there, like you are right there in Nevada. There is something happening there. I keep hearing amazing things. We had Gard Jameson on and got an opportunity to be able to be stunned by that conversation, as we have you.
Isn't he?
Tell us what's happening out there in that created place called Las Vegas.
Oh my goodness. Vegas is the city of lights, and in the spiritual sense as much as the physical. When I was 4 or 5, my parents took me to Vegas on a Vegas vacation for summer. Don't ask me why. But anyway, they asked me the next year, okay, well, where do you want to go to vacation this summer? And I said, at all of 6 years of age, Las Vegas, because it's just an energy and a presence here that I resonated with. And so I made it here by way of Texas, but I made up in my mind very early on that this is where I wanted to live and didn't really understand why. But as I started seeking other paths of spirituality, every person I found was in Las Vegas. And I'm like, how does this keep happening? That's Sin City. That's not supposed to be spiritual city, but it really is. There's such an opportunity here. And because it is so young and lacks the pillars and some of those things that are set in other places, it's a place of innovation and of change. And if you think about when people come here, whether it's moving here or for a vacation, they really have one of two things on their mind. If they're coming for a vacation, they're typically coming to have a good time. Leave all your troubles behind. I'm headed to Vegas. We're going to have fun. It's going to be joyous. We're going to just experience the fullness of life. The other side of it is, the performers that come and others that come to live here, they're coming for innovation and reinvention. And so what I'm discovering is when those two meet, magic happens. When you have the joy of life, embracing change instead of fearing and rejecting change, that's when the magic really happens. And that's what Vegas does for people. We're exploring restorative justice here. We have the drug courts that are specifically working with those populations. We have the homeless work here. Our education system is constantly changing and evolving. We're the 5th largest district in the country. And so we have to constantly evolve and change. So everything about this city is at a place where it's growing. Now, we don't get everything right. We're not doing everything the way we should, but we are changing and we're not afraid of change. So that's the magic of Vegas.
I had no idea.
You have really put it and opened my mind on that, because and I love what you were saying about how we're not getting everything right, because that, if you look back at how they created the Constitution when we were doing that, when the African American was 3/5 the value of a white male, where women were not given suffrage, when we were all, that was not by any means a perfect document, but it was structured to go toward a more perfect union. And in doing that, there are going to be mistakes. It's easy to say no. You can say no. All right, fine, we're not going to do it. But the minute you say yes, now the work begins.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about mistakes is they show that you're trying. They show that you're active. If you never make a mistake, then you're not really growing. You're not trying anything new. You're not expanding. And I look back at some of my old sermons and absolutely cringe. I do. Because I'm like, no, take it back, and you can't say it.
Unring the bell.
Unring it. Oh my God. But I was trying, and that's the thing about this.
Yeah.
I love the place that I'm in now is I appreciate the mistakes. I appreciate when you get it wrong, because that's a learning opportunity. That's an opportunity for us both to grow. I look at your mistakes as my own mistakes, and I look at my wins as your wins, because we're all, in my opinion, connected. I know I am because you are. And so I think it's very important that we allow people to expand and allow people to progress, even if it's just my self-serving reason, because I'm not who I was 5 years ago, 15 days ago, 5 minutes ago.
Right.
I want the permission to change. I want the permission to think differently, to be swayed by new information and new experiences. If I stayed where I was 10 years ago, when I really first was in the prime, we'll say, of my ministry, then I would be rejecting myself as a gay male. I would be rejecting the Black Lives Matter movement because they're radical, and they talk about things like raising a family as a village instead of the nuclear family, which village raising is kind of, ancient. That's how we started. Tribes, everyone was everyone's mother and father, everyone's brother and sister, and
that's how they survived.
Afraid of that. But anyway, that's another talk show too.
Well, we have that.
Yeah.
How did you come to the place, or talk about some of the ways that you came to the place for having compassion for yourself, for your own defects and your own flaws, so that you could love yourself the way, because that's what I have been on my journey. I'm a compulsive self-loather. I had that with all of the blessings and all that I had this self-loathing that just continued to go, that is beyond my ability to deal with. It has been my journey on being able to do that. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. When I discovered that I was absolutely perfect, that I was completely divine, that's when I began to have self-compassion. When I stopped looking at myself as a filthy sinner and my righteousness as filthy rags, that's when I began to have self-compassion, because I felt worthy. When I discovered that each and every one of us is worthy, each and every one of us is a spark of the divine. When I going back to again, my Christian upbringing, the very first few pages of the Bible says, in the beginning, God created man in his image and his likeness. And I said, well, if I was created in the image and likeness of God, if I'm God's offspring, and the Bible even says, everything reproduces after its own kind. So if God reproduced, then I must be the God kind, which must mean I must be at a minimum adequate. If I'm nothing else, I'm at least adequate. So that allows me to then employ compassion and self-forgiveness. Forgiveness is a huge piece of this. I have to not hold on to these chains that keep me bound to what are flaws and shortcomings, and really just growth. No one looks at a baby and, pooping in the diaper and say, oh my gosh, you're such a horrible human being. They say, that's the baby, it's developing. When the baby takes its first step and then falls, we applaud and celebrate the fall. So why don't we celebrate when we fall and when we get it short, fall short? We should, because that's part of the process. We're in a continual state of growth and development, and we'll be that way for all eternity, which is the beauty of life. I mean, if you think of God as something infinite, that means there's no end and nothing that it excludes. So if it's truly infinite, then even our mistakes are divine.
Yes. And that's what a beautiful statement. Thank you. You're Clay?
I don't know. I don't know where to go. I'm speechless.
It's just lovely. What are you writing now? What are the creative pieces that are on your front door, the tickling of your mind, and where the inspiration is coming in for this? This is something I want to do.
You're hitting a sensitive subject there, my friend.
I know. That's where we're trying
Bingo.
for. You can't do that to us. You can't call us out and do all this other stuff and not have it to you.
So I'm really attempting to focus because I have so many different projects that are happening all at once. I actually have a complete manuscript for a book that will never see the light of day because it's not where I am anymore. And I thought of releasing it as part of the journey, and I'm like, nah, I don't even want to muddy the water there. So what I'm working on, my third book that I actually hope to release is entitled Emancipation. And it comes from a play that I wrote for my church, which was The Emancipation of Oz. So I'm a huge Wizard of Oz fan. I love everything about it, Wicked, and all the different iterations. And so this book really focuses on, I'm the central character, but my emancipation and the journey and why I had to go to Oz to find freedom. And so that's what everything is really centering around right now, is this journey of finding emancipation and freedom and liberty and really the essence of life, and breaking through these stereotypes and breaking through these self-imposed limitations and really allowing myself to be who I am. Marianne Williamson has a work that is incredibly powerful. It's so powerful that often it gets attributed to Nelson Mandela.
Right.
But she says our greatest fear is not that we're inadequate. It's that we are powerful beyond measure. And I'm paraphrasing here. But that's our greatest fear. So throughout this journey, the book is kind of written in two ways. One, where I'm doing a little spiritual teaching, where we talk about the concept of the divinity in all of us and awakening and consciousness, but also part of it's told as this story. And I'm borrowing from that play where we have the wizard and the Tin Man and Toto is even a part of it,
Yes.
We love dogs. So I interweave this fantasy with this spiritual component, because a lot of times what happens is when we present something as fact, when it contradicts what someone is already holding to be true, instant barrier. They immediately protect themselves, because when you challenge someone's idea, you're challenging their sense of identity. Right. And so I don't want to do that so directly and in a way that it's easy to reject. But through the art, when we just say, imagine if, picture this. I love, the Golden Girls, Sicily, 1960, how she does that. I love that. Just picture this idea. Just go with me down this road of imagination. And when you get to the end of the road and are able to reflect, then you're able to come to your own conclusion and say, you know what, this idea that I've held so tightly, I'm free to let it go. Or I'm at least able to put it on the shelf for now and explore something different, look at it from a different angle. In my office, I have a picture of an elephant, and it's kind of abstract art where it's broken into different multicolored triangles. And I look at that picture and I always remind myself of two things. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And what's the other part? When you're touching the story of the three people touching the elephant, I might have the elephant's trunk today. Tomorrow I may have the elephant's tail. The next day I may have its side. But it's still one elephant. And we're one humanity, one creation. And we have different facets of this oneness. So we're all different pieces, but we're yet and still part of the whole. And we're still whole ourselves. So I hope that kind of touches on the question.
Well, it does, certainly does for me. And I love the idea of a hologram, because within the hologram, the entire picture is within every single little piece. And so I take that and I extrapolate that as a sense of that every single person is complete. Exactly. They are the complete, absolute representation of the spiritual principle of the Father, Mother, God, complete inside their own, even though they're individuated manifestations of the same principle.
Yes, and Rumi has a great work that says, I am not a drop in the ocean, I'm the ocean in a drop. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about.
God bless Rumi. Yes.
And I like to add on to it, which is even the drop, for it to truly be the ocean, it has to be with other drops. So that keeps us connected in that way.
Amen. Amen. You know, a few minutes ago, you were on the idea of what if, and you were on the Wizard of Oz and so forth. And it brought to mind a very deep conversation that I had a week ago. And one of the fellows was doing some really deep work, self-work, and really deep. And he started writing, could it be possible that this didn't happen? Could it be possible that I looked at it wrong? Could it be possible? Could it be possible? And it blew me back. The power of that changes the nature of the whole question. It's more, what if, but could it be possible?
Thank you.
And there was so much grace in that. And anyway, I had to put that in there because
I love that. And I will say that add to that is that the less certain I am, certainty is toxic for me. Because when I think I know and I think I have a complete, absolutely, I know my position on that, and I'm just fine. Thank you, Clint.
Yeah.
So that this is the grace of being willing to sit in the not knowing.
Yeah. That's it. And that's one of my favorite terms for God is the great mystery or the great unknown.
Yeah.
And it's because the certainty piece is really what limits our understanding and our ability to perceive and to create. The thing about life that I really admire is it's not just cyclical, but it's something that builds, like building blocks. So in order for us to imagine the cell phone, we had to have the landline phone, where we can have that connected first. And a new shoe is an old cow, I like to say. It's the skin of the old creates the new. And so everything that we're able to envision still rests on what we gained from our ancestors and what was there before us. So honoring that and admiring that. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier with letting people live in their time slot in history as well. 100 years ago, things were different. Let's just be okay with that. 2,000 years ago when Jesus walked the earth, things were just different. So let's be okay with that. And let's also be uncertain and know that we can't be particularly sure that every single thing we imagined to be was that way, because we see the world not as it is, but as we are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Doesn't it go back to your sermons where you go back and you look at the sermons and you say, well, okay, you were looking at life by the light you could see by. Absolutely. And the light you could see by was as far as that could take you. There was darkness beyond the edge of that light. And now you can see with a different eyes than you were seeing then.
Yeah. Doesn't make that wrong.
The only thing I'm certain of is that there's more for me to learn.
Isn't that wonderful? That is exactly.
Golly.
And so one of the things that I ask for is for me to sit and wonder how things are. Because if you take a look at some of the pictures of airports in the 50s. Everyone is carrying their luggage.
Yeah.
Okay. No. Now, wheels had been invented
a long time ago.
It's not that. It's just nobody had just put those two together in a way and been able to get it enough so that I want to know, so what are the other things that are in my life that are absolutely within 10 years are going to be blindingly obvious, but please let me see them today so that I can heal and grow.
Yeah.
And that's something I wrestle with every day, because about 2 years ago, my mom retired. And so she moved out to Vegas with me. And it's been wonderful. I love having her here. But I laugh at her daily. I should say laugh with her, because not like laugh at her.
There you go. Just in case
you caught that just in time, right?
Nice. That's a great catch.
Yeah. But I laugh because I see her excellence in the age she came up in.
Yes.
Her absolute, I don't know the right word, but how obsolete she is today. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. But for example, when she wants to give me something, she prints it out. And I'm like, Mom, you can just scan it and send me a picture or text it to me, but she prints it and then she puts it in a folder and keeps it. Her records are impeccable, but I'm like, you can also just store it on a flash drive and it takes up this much space. Those tiny things, I'm like, well, where am I going to be obsolete in the future? How are my habits going to translate 20 years?
Oh, your time will come.
And I love your perspective, Will, because that's true. Is for us to be able to say there are the people. One of the greatest lessons that I had was the Grammy Awards, because when I was in my teens or in my 20s or this, I knew every single act that was on there and most of the music anyway, or at least during the time and then gradually as I get in my 30s, I got about 3/4 I might have heard of it, but now I got into my 40s and then suddenly there was like, I would only recognize a couple if there was some kind of an award for the elders. But now they can have the Grammy Awards and I cannot not have either heard the music or of like about 80% of the people that are on there. And so there I am. There I am. I'm with your mother. She and I are sitting there together, going, we have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, what's really sad is I'm actually already in that boat with you. What the who?
I want to ask you about something culturally. Well, you have something, Clay.
No, you go ahead first. No, you go first.
Okay. Well, I had an interesting experience after going through all the deep dive that we've been going through racially and trying to see and growing myself and my consciousness of it. I watched a movie with my wife the other night. Its name is Dolomite Is My Name. It's Eddie Murphy. And I'm trying to picture that just in this few months, how I would have looked at that film beforehand. This is a film in the 1970s about Los Angeles and a guy who becomes a film producer and a comedian in this, but it's very much of a period piece of that time and of Los Angeles in that time. And I look at it with completely different eyes. I look at it as a historical piece, whereas had I not gone through this deep dive into my own conscious and unconscious racial biases, I would have looked at it completely differently.
Mm.
Yeah, I actually happened to see that one, which is surprising. So, but that was a film my husband and I watched together and laughed. And the ridiculousness of it all, it's hilarious. But when you're talking about period pieces and art expression and all of these things, again, it kind of goes back to what we hinted about earlier, which is the experience is just different depending on your upbringing. So yes. I was very fortunate, and I even struggle when I say that at this point because there's value in every experience. But I didn't grow up in a situation where I was impoverished or had the stereotypical Black experience. Mm-hmm. And so it just was different. Now, my father grew up in the projects. He has 7 brothers and sisters. They grew up in a 2-room project with their parents. And, but he created a business and is flourishing, purchased his own home at like 20, sent his siblings through college, so he was able to do that. My mom, grew up with a family of 5, and they started in a 3-family flat, upgraded to a 2-family, and then, a single family home. Her youngest sibling is a medical doctor now, so that we've been able to do that and experience that as a family. But by the same token, my grandparents were part of the civil rights movement. And they were in Detroit when they deployed the tanks and they saw the race riots, and all of these experiences are part of our family history. My grandmother, her mother was actually the daughter of a slave owner. So, this isn't like ancient history for me. It's part of the family makeup, and it's not that far away. But when I look at things like Dolomite or the show Good Times or, anything like that, as I watch it today, I'm seeing something different than even 2 months ago, 3 months ago. And it's something that I'm seeing the the reinforcement of this internalized racism. So just because, I'm Black doesn't mean I'm not racist. And that's one thing where I do disagree with a lot of people. I think Black people can absolutely be racist.
Yes.
And internalized racism, I think, is just as insidious, if not more so, than overt racism or something like you would have with the KKK. I think that all of these pictures reinforce the standard of the white male as the standard versus the white male being a version of, what we can be. And
nice. Oh, God, I love how you said that.
Yeah. So when we look at like a dolomite or the dynamite, whatever it may be, we have to be very conscious not to look at them as caricatures, but as
look at the hero's journey. That's what I was talking about. I looked at him as the hero's journey, as the compassion. I saw myself in him in ways that I never would have seen before. I saw the resilience and the compassion in him and the humor and all the work that was there that gave me inspiration, where at the past I would have had been one step away instead of having a deep identification with Will.
Yes. And I love hearing you say that, because that to me should be, a commercial, a 30-second commercial, what you just said, on every major network, because there's still a lot of distrust out there. There's still a lot of, I don't think we can really believe what's happening in this moment. But transformation is truly, truly happening. And it's not just happening, but it's taking root and becoming sustainable. And so we're seeing the world that we prayed for so many years taking shape. It's the birthing process, so there's a whole lot of hurt in there, but it's happening. And so thank you for sharing that. And I also want to just add, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So I had a question. You've started a podcast, and it's Compassionate Las Vegas, tied with Charter for Compassion. Can you talk about that some?
Absolutely. So thank you for introducing that subject. I am so thrilled with this podcast. It was not something I ever envisioned or, wanted to create, but we were actually, Guard and a few others of us were sitting around talking about what can we do to really get this message out? And someone just said, what about a podcast? And we were like, you know what, that'd be amazing. And as we were talking about it, I'm thinking, other people are going to do the podcast. And then it's and I was like, you know what? This is what I love. So absolutely, I'm all in on it. So we've completed our first season, which was really showing compassionate practices for the self in light of COVID-19. Because when we planned the podcast, it was going to be face-to-face, and we, of course, got some equipment so we could do wonderful face-to-face podcasts. And there's like, no, we're going to do them on Zoom because you have to have social distance. So, but we've had some incredible people on, and everything from the subject of race to mental health, to URI, the United Religions.
Yes.
We've had all of that, and it's been so powerful, and people have really just been so appreciative of it. Because one thing we were intentional about is making sure that in each and every episode, we gave practical, easy to apply steps to employ self-compassion. Because right now in this moment, we have to do that. We have to share what's working for us personally with others so that they can grasp on. And our tagline is amplifying hope. I think hope is really a wellspring of life. And in this moment when things look so dark, we've got to remind people good things are happening. We don't dismiss the challenges, but we remind people amazing things, wonderful things, inspirational things are happening each and every day. And our focus, of course, is Las Vegas. So they're happening right here in our city. And here are some people you can reach out to if you need a little extra boost of inspiration.
I love it.
I do too. Local to global. It really says bloom where we're planted. Make it happen here, and then it will resonate and allow the rest of us to connect.
What I'm thrilled with what you're doing, and I've got this vision
beyond.
I'm talking with Charlie Barker, the chair for for Charter for Compassion, and he's asked me, so what can you develop an initiative for men and boys? And I said, well, I can't develop it, but I can go do research and stir up the conversation. And that's morphed into coming together with my men's circle. And then now we're doing this podcast, In Search of the New Compassionate Male. And a vision that I've come up with, and I'll say it this way, could it be possible that all of the podcasts that are around the world that have anything to do with compassion or men, could we network together? Because that, to me, the old term in the 80s was guerrilla marketing, And I just really feel like there's a possibility. First, because I think podcasters like to interview podcasters,
I think that's a really important aspect of it, because we need to go behind the scenes and go,
Yeah.
what are we doing?
Yeah. What can I do to help give voice to your message?
Yes.
And all the boats are rising.
Yeah, I really, again, appreciate you bringing that up, and you're absolutely right. The more that we're able to collaborate and connect and help each other, the better off we all are. And that's the thing that I think is the beauty of humanity, is when we really collaborate, when we put our differing perspectives together, we're able to create something that is so wonderful and so edifying that we all rise and then are able to do it again and then do it again. It just,
Right.
There are could it be that there are no limits to what we are capable of? So I love your idea and the heart behind it, and fully on board.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Clay. And thank you, audience, for this opportunity to have, and make no mistake about this, a first conversation with Will Rucker, because we're going to be tracking you down. There is so much more we want to say, and thank you, and we will see you next time.